Are you a scaling SaaS founder?
Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where managing finance is like juggling gold bars, heavy, valuable, and you better not drop one. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. Today, we're diving into how you can make your business worth 10 times more. Whether you are preparing to sell or simply building long-term value, these strategies are crucial for every entrepreneur. So you ready to maximize your company's worth? The road to increasing your business's valuation is often filled with challenges. Many business owners focus on daily operations but miss key opportunities to scale their company's value. It's easy to get stuck in the grind of revenue generation without considering the bigger picture. We all do that. There's so many demands on our day that we just want to do that and don't take a step back and really focus on what really matters in building long-term value. So what is it that will make your business more attractive to investors or buyers or private equity or venture capital or strategics? What are those things? Common struggles include lack of differentiation. So, businesses that are just kind of all the same. There's nothing that makes them stand out. Inefficient operations, low profitability. All of those make it difficult to grow the value of a business beyond the status quo. So let's talk about some proven strategies that can significantly increase the value of your business. There are 8 key drivers of value that we focus on in champion leadership, but I'll skip some of the obvious ones. Financial performance, fundamentals matter. They always have. Second, SaaS has this nailed down in a lot of cases, and that's recurring revenue. I can say a lot about that, but only contracted recurring revenue counts. So depending on your sales model and contract structure, this can be a huge add to value, or I've seen it be a really surprise hit to value as well. But here are 3, I would say, more non-obvious ones. One is the size of your moat. And this idea of a moat came from Warren Buffett. The middle picture is your business is a castle where the gold, your customers, are inside, and you have a drawbridge and a moat to keep those competitors out. It's a good picture. So this is a moat. This is a strategic competitive advantage, and not one of those things of a strategic advantage like we have great service. Cool. Not an advantage. It could be something like the cost of change. And an example of that, anybody knows Salesforce. Is it the best CRM in the world? Not for most companies, it's not. But it's lots and lots of big companies have it. Why don't they leave if it's not the best? Why don't they want the best technology? Well, it costs too much to change. And so they have a moat around that of, difficulty of change. Another example would be like economies of scale. So how does a local data center compete with AWS or Google Cloud? They have the economies of scale to provide just crazy services at rates that data centers would struggle to compete with. It could be brand recognition. Think about brands like Harley Davidson, Ferrari. For them, it's not necessarily about features. I mean, does Ferrari have all the great safety features that a Honda or a Toyota has? No, not even close. I mean, they only got 2 seats. Harley Davidson, are they really worried about, all competing with, Hayabusa, for example, the speed? They're completely different markets. It's about that brand. And so that's part of their moat is that brand story. So it's not necessarily about features. It could be a marketplace, like building an app store, or it could be a 2-sided marketplace, like Uber or Airbnb, where you have to build both sides simultaneously. That's a moat. Integrations, Zapier would be an example. So there are lots and lots of ways to build a moat, and the bigger the moat, the more valuable the company. The second is what I'll call the happiness factor. And how happy and loyal are your customers and clients? And a lot of times we'll measure that by an NPS score. There's a lot more to that, a lot more that we can do with that, but that's kind of the top level. We could take that a step further and on that happiness scale, and we could add employee happiness. So the eNPS score, employee NPS, both of those factor into valuation because it really does affect the value of the company, because what they're buying when somebody buys a company is that future revenue stream. And things that can affect it is, if everybody hates their job, hates the company and leaves, all that's a brain power walks out the door, or all the customers leave because they're really not happy and they don't like it and they're not contractually bound, then that can go away as well. So those play into it. The third one is I'll just say significant concentration, and it's not like think really hard concentration. This is like concentration of revenue, and this one bites a lot of founders, bites them right in the butt. Um, Sometimes at the closing table, sometimes at the LOI. I mean, it can be messy. But concentration of revenue in a couple of ways. One is in a single customer. The other is in their top 10 customers. And so that is a really important thing to pay attention to early on in the process and not be lopsided. There's a big chunk of my book is about that in particular. Other types of dependence would be dependence, and talking concentration, would be dependence on key employees or an employee. So if you have one person that if they left, the whole thing would fall apart. Sometimes that's the founder, and that can be a real bottleneck in a sale. It could be say you're a developer, CTO, salesperson. You have one superstar salesperson that can sell everything, but that's not something that can be duplicated. So any kind of concentration or dependence there. And the third one I would put in this category is over reliance on a specific vendor. And the idea here is that highly valued companies are independent of those. And the term that we use, we call it the Switzerland structure. So they're neutral. They're independent. So if your top developer won the lottery and retired to Hawaii, would it affect your business? If you were gone from the business for 6 months, would it affect the business? And yes or no. And either one of those answers, yes or no, both of those have an effect on business valuation. So there are lots and lots of nuances in these. And like I said, we focus on 8 key drivers of value. But getting those right are the key to making your business worth 10 times more. And these strategies aren't just for scaling. I mean, we like scaling. We definitely like scaling. But they're for scaling, and they're for increasing the overall value in the marketplace, because that's really where the gold is. So which strategy do you think would make the biggest impact on your business today? Drop me a message. I'll send you a deeper dive into all 8 drivers. Our founder on Tuesday was Pritesh Vora, co-founder and VP of Growth and Marketing at Sprinto, the #1 rated compliance automation platform. We talked about scaling 3 SaaS companies, challenging the status quo, strategic partnerships, building with customer insights, and not chasing shiny objects. Man, that's hard to do. And our expert guest last week was John McDonald, founder of The Good, a digital experience optimization firm. And he's also the author of Behind the Click. We talked about buyer journey psychology, where we mess it up, and how to get website visitors to take action in a way that focuses what they naturally want to do. If you missed either one of those episodes, go back and give them a listen. My guest today is Anthony Nitsos, financial strategist who has helped SaaS startups from pre-seed to Series B maximize their valuation with reliable metrics and a deep understanding of business economics. With experience in optimizing financial, sales, HR operations, and guiding to unicorn exits, Anthony knows how to drive value and elevate your financial strategy. Welcome, Anthony Nitsos. Hey, Anthony, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be on.
Well, today is all about finance and SaaS. What are some key components of a strong financial strategy? And let's focus on like pre-seed to Series B stage SaaS startups.
I mean, in my world, there are really 2 things that we focus on most with our clients. One is the cash forecast, and it's followed by the cash forecast. Other than
That's
that,
a
the
good
rest
one.
of it's details. The reality is that you can't spend net income. You can only spend what's in your bank account. And if you don't have an accurate cash forecast out at least 12 to 18 months, you're flying blind. You're driving your car with a blindfold on. Pick your favorite metaphor. it's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can only spend actual cash. Where do companies get themselves in trouble in not having that cash forecast accurate and up to date?
Well, I mean, I can give you plenty of examples where we've come into a client situation where it's like, we don't know where our cash is going. Okay, that's a bad thing. So having there's what we call the financial core. Having your financial core set up so that you can get this information easily and quickly is key to what we do. So a lot of times the accounting system's been set up by a tax CPA. It doesn't show them what their gross margin is. It doesn't show them what their sales and marketing spend is. You see silly things like payroll in one line item, no departments. There's no forward-looking projection, or maybe they put one together to get their financing round, but nobody's updated it since. It's not being refreshed on a monthly basis with actuals. There's a lot of discipline that comes in with properly managing your company from a finance perspective, and it is, you need to know what's happened and you need to know what's coming. And you need somebody sitting there in the middle of all this to make sure that all that information is being, produced and digested appropriately and given to the executive team. So where companies typically get into trouble is they don't get that set up first. Hey, yeah, we got $5 million. Great, let's go spend it. Well, if you don't know how you're going to spend it, what's your organization going to look like? Who are you going to hire? When are you going to hire? Why do you need to hire them? What's your sales plan look like? Where are your customers coming from? How are you generating leads? What's your go-to-market strategy? Is it actually valid? All that. I'm assuming that if you've got money that you've already vetted your product market fit. Now the question is, can you translate that into actual closed contracts?
Right.
How many of those closed contracts? How many of them are prepaid? How many of them are monthly? How much of it's software? There's just so many things that can be really overwhelming to a starting CEO or even one that's experienced, where somebody like myself and my team come in, we do this for a living. It's easy for us to put this together in a format that makes sense and can present it to them. I literally just got off the phone with, a client, prospective client on the same topic. We put together a budget to get our round 3 months ago, and we've been flying blind since then. Can you help us? Yes, exactly what we do.
Yeah,
so
that's really important.
To me, it's CFO should not stand for Chief Financial Officer. It should be Cash Flow Oracle, and that is our
like
job.
that.
We are there to tell you the future on your cash, and that's our job. That's it. We have other things. I'm not saying there's nothing more to that, like helping you figure out what your next round pre-money valuation is, and how to set up your contracts for maximization of ARR and valuation, and helping you find waste in the organization, using our experience to say, hey, you really probably don't need to hire a CTO this early. Maybe a VP of engineering is enough to get you where you need to go. That kind of value added that we bring. But ultimately, 80 to 90% of my conversations with my clients on an ongoing basis is over the cash forecast.
Yeah. So outside of cash, what are some of the most critical financial metrics SaaS founders should be looking at and track from the very beginning, and how do those influence business decisions?
Tracked from the very beginning, of course, your ARR, that annualized recurring revenue. You need to make sure that you are accurately measuring that. And there are rules about that. And there are definitely ways to screw it up. Your net retained revenue, or net dollar retention, which is of the customers that you had 12 months ago, if that's what you're looking at, how many of them are still with you and what's happened? Did they expand? Did they contract?
Right.
Your gross margin. Gross profit is absolutely a key metric for software companies. Understand that it's going to be lower in the beginning while you're ramping up, but you need to have a clear, again, forward-looking financial statement plan that shows when this thing is going to cross 70%, 75%, 80%, and ideally around 85%, which is where you want to land for a SaaS company. And, making sure that you have all the components of gross margin properly represented. I can't tell you how many companies I've come into and they say, I don't know what my gross margin is, what's supposed to go in it. And making sure that what you're putting in there is what the SaaS industry expects you to put in there, not what somebody made up. CAC, cost to acquire a customer. That's another absolute. So if I look at, say, I call them the big five, right? Your cash runway, I think I've beaten that dead horse enough. Your ARR growth, your net retained revenue, your gross margin, and your cost to acquire customers. I would say beyond that, it's details. There are plenty of other metrics out there. I mean, there are SaaS CFO types out there that like to have 20 metrics to measure everything from A to Z. I think if you focus on those key 5 from the beginning, you're going to take care of 95% of your problems.
Yeah. Can you explain the concept of true economics in a SaaS business and why that's important for founders to have a deep understanding of true economics and what it is, how it works?
When you say true economics, tell me what you mean by that.
Well, I think it's really how the business operates. What is CAC? What goes into gross margin? It's really having the real numbers and understanding what it is, not just made up or not just at the surface level, but really understanding, what are the true unit economics in this business?
Yes. Okay. So it starts from, are you accounting for everything properly? We call this the financial core. And it starts with your general ledger, whether it's QuickBooks or Xero or whatever it happens to be, NetSuite, it doesn't really matter. The SaaS industry over the years has evolved its financial statements into a pretty standard way of formatting. It starts with your revenue. It goes into your gross profit. From there, you're looking at R&D spend. You're looking at sales and marketing spend. You're looking at G&A. And within those, there are different departments. It's fairly standard. Okay, if you take a look at any of the 10K reports from your publicly traded companies, they pretty much follow the same format. So, and this is not like an accounting thing. This is a finance thing. When you come to financial statement presentation, you need to have financial statements that follow SaaS. If you don't, there's no way for you to benchmark, because everybody who's doing the benchmarking, doesn't matter which company's out there doing the benchmarking, whether it's Pacific Crest, now KeyBank, or whoever it happens to be, they're following a set formula for how they're gathering that data from the surveys that they put together in order to create those benchmarks. And you pretty much need to follow along. So we learned that a long time ago. And so the first thing we do when we come into a company is we clean up the general ledger. We clean up the accounting system. Invariably, it's not done correctly. We just finished that with a company because they didn't know. What's my gross margin? I don't know what my CAC is. I don't know what my net retained. So CAC and gross margin, those come out of the accounting system. All the other ones that I mentioned, and ARR, net retained revenue, those are coming out of your, what we call the SaaS metrics system. And there's software that does that, and you can also do it on spreadsheets, which is kind of clumsy. But you need to really know that what you're reporting for ARR and NRR, those are 2 real critical numbers. Your churn, your contraction, your expansion, your growth. All of those recurring revenue numbers are correct for the base analysis, and that what's coming out of your accounting system is correct, again, for the base analysis. Once those 2 are nailed, then you put the numbers together and you say, okay, our gross margin is 63%. Wow, that stinks. What are we doing? Oh, it's taking us too long to implement, right? Our implementation teams are too big. We have too many bugs in the software. Our support teams are overwhelmed. We're having to constantly hire people to, man the phones because they're constantly dealing with customer complaints about software that's not working. It doesn't matter. What it is you're looking at, our hosting costs. We're replicating all the data from our customers into AWS and then spitting it back to AWS. Wow, that's triplicating your hosting cost. What are you doing to fix that? So what happens is it's kind of an illumination process. Once you get the right numbers and everybody can see what they are, that's the illumination piece. That is the 12-step program. That's the first step, right? You need to be able to recognize what the problem is before you can analyze and fix it. So, and that shows up in numbers. There isn't a single thing that happens in your company that doesn't have a financial impact. So sooner or later, it's going to show up in the profit and loss statement or the balance sheet somewhere. And then it needs to be then translated into key performance metrics, those SaaS metrics we keep talking about, so that you can then benchmark and say, hey, our CAC is $3. Well, that's like 2.5 times what the average, I'm just throwing a number out there. Maybe the average rate now is about $1, but that's too high. What's going on? Why is it costing us so much money to get new customers?
Right.
Our churn is ridiculous. Maybe that churn has been hidden because you've had a lot of expansion on your, the customers that do remain, and the churn is hidden, so you don't see that. That's where, again, you have to have all those pieces together. So when it comes to the unit economics, it really comes down to, is the base data that you put together in your financial core producing the information that you can actually make real decisions on.
Yeah. The market has changed a lot over the last couple of years in regard to finance, the way companies are valued. What are you seeing that companies can do that helps them maximize their valuation as they progress through different funding stages?
So it comes back to really two key metrics. It's that ARR, is it truly recurring revenue? And let's talk about that first. And the second one is gross margin. So on the first topic, you have a contract with a customer.
Right.
We're dealing with this right now. They have a base subscription, and then they have a usage component. And that usage component varies up and down.
Sure.
I'll tell you what, that usage component is worth jack on a valuation. The base subscription, you'll get 6 to 10x of that annualized recurring revenue for your valuation. But the usage fees piece of it is going to be maybe 1, if they even pay attention to it. So what you want to do is you want to take that subscription contract and say, within this subscription, you're allowed a certain amount of usage. So here's your subscription fee.
Right.
And we're not going to charge you for usage. We're going to give you a subscription. And if you go over that, we're going to bump you to the next level of your subscription. So I really caution people that if you're going for maximum valuation in a SaaS company, your ARR, true recurring revenue, is the single most important metric to drive your valuation. And usage fees is a black hole that's going to suck you into oblivion. You need to structure your contract so that the usage fee is included in the base subscription in bands, if you will. And this is critical. Your software has notifications and switches that tells you when a customer is outside of band. So if they've gone over their usage quota, they get bumped up automatically to the next level. And the contracts are written to represent that. If you have usage, right? And some do. I mean, there might be,
Sure.
Twilio text messaging. There might be, SMS. There could be any of a number of things that might be driving that. I'm not saying that's not revenue, but a lot of it comes down to how is it packaged so that when the investors come in, or the would-be investors come in, they're looking at it saying, oh, here's your recurring revenue. Great. I'm going to multiply that times whatever. Oh, those usage things? Yeah, I don't care about that.
Right.
I literally had that conversation 2 weeks ago. Investor came in.
Guaranteed revenue, it's not recurring.
It's usage fees. It's reoccurring. Okay, that's fine. We can put whatever lipstick on that pig we want. But in the end, it's not subscription revenue. And that's what SaaS is. It's software as a subscription, right? It's not software as a usage fee. And this is the part that I sometimes struggle with CEOs. Oh, yeah, well, we make all this money. I said, yeah, it's great from a cash flow perspective, and I don't want to discount that because you need cash flow. But there's the other side of this, which is your valuation for your next round.
Yep.
And you want that maximum valuation. So that's one, that subscription. The second piece is that gross margin piece. And being able to make sure that your software is delivered efficiently on hosting, that it takes very little to stand it up for the clients, so your implementation costs are low, and that it's pretty much bulletproof so that you don't have a lot of tech follow-on in terms of support calls. Because if your software consumes a lot of hosting, that right there is going to come off your gross margin. If it requires a lot of hand-holding to get it started up, well, you need people for that. And people are expensive, and they're fixed costs, right? It's not like you can, hey, I'm going to go out to Upwork and I'm going to find myself an implementation person, contractor, and use them for a few hours, and then I'm going to turn them off. That's not going to work. We all know that, right? So these are fixed costs. And then you have the post-implementation, the post-go-live, the support team, the ones that are there to answer questions, what I call the how to use and why it doesn't work people. How do I use it? Oh, here's where you go for that. Why doesn't it work? What's broken? So if you have a really good knowledge base where people can click through and find how to use stuff, and honest to God, folks, it better be in videos nowadays. If you make me sit there and read through another manual, I'm just going to fire your software right there. Okay, I don't have time to read. I want when I launch a piece of software myself, I want it easy. I am not a techie, right?
Right.
Yeah, I work with tech companies all the time. I'm the finance guy. My background's actually in human medicine, and I became a finance guy late in life, right? So I want stuff that's easy to analyze and easy to implement. I don't have time to sit there and read through manuals. So it better not be written. It better be audio visual, which is you've got easy click through. Here's how you do it, step you through it, right?
Right.
And it's easy to set up. So you got to hit those three check boxes to get the right gross margin. Low production cost, which means low hosting cost. Easy to implement, which means you don't have a big delivery and implementation team. And bulletproof software that your engineering team has created and has done a proper job on QA, so there aren't any bugs. And a really easy to use really easy to use training base, so that a user can come and say, yeah, how do I use it for that's how I do it.
Right.
Those to me, that ARR number, that true recurring revenue, and a healthy gross margin, that's what's going to get you your valuations.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, definitely easy to use. I remember building our software a number of years ago. The customers would ask, where's the manual? It's like, well, there isn't one, because if you need a manual, then we wrote terrible software. But then building that
We haven't
into
done our job.
implementation, that journey of onboarding and how to use it and really getting them deeper into the product, video is so good for that.
Yeah. Now, I'm not talking about ERP systems here. Okay. I'm talking about your, run-of-the-mill type of easy stuff.
Sure.
There are certain software packages where, there's a heavy implementation lift, but even ERP, like Intact or NetSuite or whoever it is, they've come a long way.
Yes.
In terms of doing exactly what I just said, making it easy to implement. They had to. I was doing ERP implementations prior to the Y2K crisis, which I don't know how many people on your show even remember what that is or know what it is, but everybody thought their code was going to blow up when the year 2000 came along, because everybody had written their code with just 2-year digits, right? So what was going to happen when 00 came along? So everybody and their brother and sister was out there buying SAP and Bond and JD Edwards and MFG Pro and every other software you could think of way back then. And back then it was, you spent millions of dollars of on-premise hardware and you spent millions of dollars of implementation, and you had entire teams doing nothing but help you implement. Well, the unit economics don't make sense anymore.
Right.
They just don't. People want click of button, stand it up. Oh, I've got my subscription. Oh, yep, start. Okay, put my name in, get my login set up. Yep, connect it to QuickBooks, whatever it is. I'll use Carta as an example, right? Carta, or even SaaS Optics, what's called Maxio as an example. Very easy systems to implement. Why? A, they work. B, they're easy to implement. And C, they work. Okay? It's kind of the standard formula. So back to your point, if your software requires a team of people to implement or manage, you're already dead.
Yep.
You're already dead, because you're not going to have the gross margin. That cash from your gross margin is what helps you run the rest of your business.
Exactly.
And once you run out of venture capital, which sooner or later you will, right? That's the whole idea, is you get venture capital to get you to the next stage, whatever it is. At some point, you need to be cash flow positive. You're not going to be cash flow positive if your gross margin's sitting around 50%.
No, that's true. And even the big companies like SAP, I was involved with that for right around that same timeline, through Y2K and a few years after that. Old implementations really were long projects, 6 months, a year, 2 years, but big companies, millions and millions of dollars. And even they have switched to a SaaS model and have come full circle, where implementations are much faster now, much more agile. Very, very different. So even the large enterprise have moved that direction in making things much faster, much easier to implement, and much faster to cash, which has allowed them to move into other markets. It's not just the Fortune 500, but small, medium-sized businesses. NetSuite is another example of that. Oracle was huge, and now has moved into the mid-market and even small market.
Yeah, you just touched on something that I wanted to emphasize. Time to cash.
Yes.
Time to cash, what that means is from the time you sign the contract until the time you get cash, right? That's how I look at it. Big. I sign a contract with customer X today. If I leave it up to them when I start invoicing them for their subscription, I'm dead.
Yep. Made that
When
mistake.
you have Yes, when you put a contract together, so I've got the same scar on my backside from that one from a long time ago from clients, because I always come in and I'm like, yeah, we invoice, they get their sales contract. I said, when do you start invoicing them? Oh, when they're live. I said, who holds the reins on who's the gatekeeper on when they go live? Well, we got to do this and this, and then the customer's got to do this and this. And I said, you've already given me the answer. We need to change your contracts that the subscription starts from the day they sign the contract.
Yep.
Because once they have cash skin in the game, they're going to move to get that thing implemented.
Right.
If you leave it up to them to do it when they get around to it, you're going to be sitting there till the cows come home before you even get the invoice out the door, let alone collect the cash.
Yep.
So that is a real important thing when you're putting your contracts together as
there's no procrastination penalty.
Nope. You need to have a procrastination penalty. I like that one. That's a good one. You need to have that built into the contracts from day one, which is you sign the contract, here's your invoice. Payments due upon receipt or net 30 or whatever it is that you've negotiated. Ideally due on receipt. And by the way, we don't start moving on anything until we get, you could even be that, we don't start moving on anything until we get payment. You don't necessarily need to do that, but I mean, you could.
Sure.
But you make it clear up front. Your subscription is a 12-month subscription paid annually in advance. That's another one. Please stay away from monthly payments.
So you like annual payments better, just from a
annual
cash
upfront.
perspective?
From a cash flow perspective and a quality of revenues perspective, right? So if I'm an investor and I'm looking at it and saying, hey, this customer could stop paying you at any point over the next 12 months, the quality of that revenue is less than, you get it all up front. So there's both a cash benefit to getting it all up front, but there's also a quality of earnings valuation multiple.
Sure.
There's a discount that's going to get factored in there if you're monthly, right? That's how the investors are going to look at it and say, there is a flight risk. This customer could just stop paying you midterm. Doesn't matter what their contract says. I mean, you can say, well, the contract says they're committed to 12 months. I say, great. What are you going to do if they stop paying you?
Exactly.
You going to send the attorneys after them? They're expensive.
And how critical is the solution? Is it something they can just decide tomorrow, I'm not going to do this anymore? Where if it's an ERP system, they're kind of committed to that. So it makes a lot more sense. But just that quality of earnings, like you said, you're going to get a different level of company signing up if it's all up front for a year or if it is monthly or quarterly or whatever it is. So those are just two different places.
And you may have to settle for quarterly or monthly when you're getting started because, hey, you know what? You frost the glass. I need you as a customer. Okay. I need revenue. Okay. I totally understand that. And that is a valid consideration. But you should have it in your mind. We need to get away from that ASAP. The gold standard is annual paid up front. That is what you're going to get the best valuations on. And that's you pointed out the big one. That's best for your cash flow.
Right.
I worked for a company where we had taken in a total of $50 million worth of investment and got to 100 million, crossed the 100 million in ARR threshold, and we still had 37.5 million of it in the bank. Why? Annual upfront contracts.
Yep. That's a good place to be.
That's the best place to be, sitting on a pile of cash as dry powder. And
you got options.
If you think about the capital efficiency there, right? It net cost them $12.5 million to get to 100 million of ARR.
Some good numbers.
That's stunning.
That makes you very attractive.
That's kind of like top drawer, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, from a capital efficiency standpoint, you asked about what's changed in the industry is the focus on capital efficiency. But didn't used to be such a big focus. Now it is, and what that is how many dollars of investment has it taken you to get your ARR? So if I've invested, say, $5 million into you, and you're only at 250,000 of ARR, you've got a problem.
Right.
If I've invested 5 million into you and you're at 5 million of ARR, you've done a great job.
Yeah.
Right. So that of money invested into ARR achieved, that's called capital efficiency. That's I'd say that's a background one that I always keep an eye on with my clients, because that's going to come up in your next investment round.
Well, it's important to know because it's like an ATM or, a banker. I mean, it is an investment, but if I put $1 in, how much do I get out? And, you're a winner if you go to the ATM and, you say, give me $1 and it spits out 5. And that's what you're looking for in those investments is you can go to a company and you can put in 1 and they're kicking back, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Ready to dominate your market and skyrocket your revenue? Dive into Small Fish, Big Pond, building a world-class business that swims circles around competitors. This book is packed with powerful marketing and leadership insights, guaranteed to transform your business and operate world-class. Small Fish, Big Pond delivers proven strategies to sharpen your marketing message, deliver unmatched value to your clients, and guide the prospect's buying journey to one inevitable conclusion: that your company is the only solution for them. Inside, you'll find step-by-step frameworks and time-tested growth principles to attract your ideal clients, convert them, and then turn them into your passionate brand ambassadors. So grab your copy today and print ebook or audio at smallfishbigpond.com or on Amazon. Plus, remember, every book sale supports charity. So dive in and make a difference.
And all of that money went into either, product development, right? Your engineering team,
Yep.
any product research that's going on to try, new features and functions for product market fit, your marketing team, your sales team, your finance team, your executive team, your IT team, it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
All of that money is going in to support all of those people, their jobs, and the software that they're using. That needs to translate as ARR. It has to come back out as ARR. And if it doesn't, you're not going to get your next round.
Yeah, every role is an ARR producing role.
In a way, you have to look at it that way.
Yeah.
And that's where the opportunity in the industry for us lies, is that we are, by being efficient contractors, because we're fractional, you don't have to commit to a full time to, bring our expertise in. That makes you that much more efficient. So using contractors, leveraging them where they make sense, and they know what they're doing, right? Those are two critical things. Not all contractors are created equal, whether it's marketing, sales, doesn't matter. But the ability to, have a really strong core team. And that's the other thing. Startups are not the place for on-the-job training. If you think that you're going to go out and hire cheap resources and train them into it, you're already starting down the slippery slope of what I call the extinction level event of running out of cash. When you are in a startup mode, you do not have time to go find people who are going to figure it out. Yep. You need to go find people who are going to get it done. Our clients pay us for execution, not for figuring it out. And that should be the case whether it's a contract engineer you're hiring, or it's a contract product person you're hiring, or it's a contract, marketing person you're hiring. It doesn't matter. When you're in that critical initial baby stage of getting your company started up, or you're just trying to get to your first $1 million of ARR, the last person you should be hiring is your neighbor Joe, because he needs a job. Okay, you need to be hiring Jill, who is an expert and has done this 5 times. And yes, it's going to cost you more. I get that.
Yeah.
But it's, what are you paying for? You're paying for 15 or 20 years worth of experience, or 10 years, or whatever it is that's needed to come in there and get things going quickly. That's, another caveat that I have to put out there that I see too many CEO startups doing. Is like, well, my brother's been helping me since day one.
At what point have you outgrown that? Like day 2?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if brother is a genius, IQ 180, and can code in his sleep and comes back, okay, fine. I get that. But, if you're just giving jobs for people in your family because they need a job, that's, or you feel sorry, you want to bring in a bunch of interns or whatnot. There is a time and a place for that when you're bigger.
Sure.
But when you're 5 or 10 or 15 people and you're just starting up, everybody on that boat needs to be pulling on those oars as hard as possible, and you don't have any slack available to you for somebody to, who's not producing. So hire slow, which means take your time to make sure you're hiring the right person and fire fast. Get them out of there if they're not working out quickly, because the longer they're sitting there not productive, that's affecting your runway.
Without a doubt. And that's another mistake that I made is looking, and you hire, start out with a really good team and then start hiring some juniors and thinking that they're going to learn on the job and that kind of thing. And then you end up, 20 people. And I'm like, why are we less productive with 20 people than we were with 3?
Yeah.
And so it was really just, flipping that back and taking a step back and, looking at hiring practices and saying, this is not working for our stage. Maybe down the road for 100 people, maybe we try this experiment again, but this was way too early to try and do that and bring in juniors.
And where I especially see this hurt companies the most is on the sales team.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Right? It's the difference. It is the true difference between a hunter and a farmer, and knowing how to identify that personality type up front. Because when you're out there and you're looking to grow your top line, you want ruthless, implacable Terminator type of hunters, people who do not know anything in terms of, oh, I didn't get that one, I'm on to the next. They're not sitting there waiting for you to tell them what to do. They're pushing you to say, I need more leads. Where are my leads? Okay, I need more leads. Or they're going to go out and find their leads. They're going to make their leads. There are a million farmers out there. There are plenty of people who will go out and they'll take care of your existing customers and they'll help expand them and they'll help, keep, upsell and whatnot. What you want is the hunter, the person who knows no fear and has a proven track record of it. Not something where it's like, I came here and I did a great job. Okay, show me your numbers.
Yep.
How much new ARR did you bring? How much new ARR did you bring in under contract? How did you do that? What was your key to success? The chances are that if it's a salesperson looking for a job, that's not the salesperson you want. It's the salesperson who's comfortable where they are and maybe is looking for a change because they're growing a little stale or a little tired of it, but they're making a decent amount of money. And your comp package should be about 50-50 base plus variable commission. So, whatever the base is, their on-target expense should be, the commission should be equal what their base is. And you need to set it up so that they're making a decent amount of money, right? Or they're not going to stay with you, which means that your product has to fit your market, that, you've got a sales playbook that makes sense. A lot of times the founder or the CEO is the person that is the chief salesperson to begin with, right? They're the champion. They're the one that know it. What I can tell you as a piece of advice, if there's anybody out there who is in that role right now, is document the living daylights out of how you sell.
Yes.
Because what words get people to buy? What are the pain points that people are experiencing that your Band-Aid fixes? What are what's the value proposition that rings most true with them? How did you meet them? Where did you find them? All of that information that as you're doing this on your own, maybe you're gifted at it and you just fly in there and you're closing deals left, right, and center. How are you going to translate that to somebody else if you haven't put it down somewhere for them to follow in your footsteps? Right. And so making sure that information, that you're the chief sales officer when you're in the CEO role, right? It's chief executive officer. It's also chief execution officer. You're there to execute, make sure things happen. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you are the chief salesperson. You need to be really figuring out what that playbook is so that you can hand that off to somebody, because sooner or later, and it's going to be a lot sooner than you think if you're successful, you can't stay in that role. The CEO is there to guide the entire company, provide strategy, do the heavy thinking in terms of strategy. If you're spending a lot of time in the day-to-day operations, you're holding your company back. And one of the things that you need to hand off is sales. And so documenting that sales process, putting that sales playbook together so that somebody has it. Doesn't have to be extensive. I'll tell you what. Get Zoom or Gmeet or whatever it is and record yourself on calls, okay, and use a transcription. There's plenty of AI out there. This is another thing you're talking about, AI. Sure. There's plenty of AI out there to take your video and turn it into scripts.
Right.
Okay, and now you've got the data. Okay, so sales is like every other process in your company, whether it's quote to cash, doesn't matter what it is. There is a process to be followed, because when it comes to the inflection point where you need to scale, you need to have all of that ready to hand over to a team that can then run with it. If you have to slow down and teach them how to do it, you're dead. You're gonna kill yourself. If nothing else, you're not gonna have enough hours in the day to take care of your family and yourself.
And it's important that it is a process. It's not a one-off, or it's not personality sales. It's something that really is a structured process. There has to be a process in order to hand it off. Otherwise, you can't just hand off and say, okay, go do the things that I've done. Sell like me, but having a process.
Go figure it out. Yeah. Here's my call list. Go. No, that's not going to work.
It happens a lot.
Too much, and that's how they run into problems. So, you make the mistake of not hiring a hunter. You hired a farmer in wolf's clothing. You got a sheep in wolf's clothing. It's not a true hunter. And the second thing is they don't have a playbook.
Yep.
Now, so that means your first sales hire is probably, in my mind, the most important one.
Agreed. It's also, I think, the hardest.
The hardest and the most important, because you have to find somebody who fits those criteria. And they also can say from your notes or whatnot, okay, I see where you're going with this. How about if I improve on it with this? Because a true seasoned sales professional, their skills come from a number of years of experience, whatever it happens to be. They're the ones that, add that special sauce, right, of experience. Most CEOs, founders who go out there and do the sales themselves first, you talk about SaaS Fuel. That's your fuel, right, is your sales, right? You're out there fueling your business off of your own back. If you don't have at least a clear outline for an experienced salesperson to come in and say, okay, I can create your playbook for you off of this, the detailed playbook. You give them the outline, then they can go. But that first sales hire, you're absolutely correct. That is the most difficult, and it's also the most critical.
Yeah, it really is, because you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of people don't have a sales or marketing background. And that is my background. And I'll tell you, it is still one of the hardest hires to make.
It is. No question about it. Across all of our entire portfolio, I can tell you that the turnover in the sales group is the highest by far.
Yes.
Because you got to burn through them. And it all comes down to, you got to figure out if the person you're on the other side of the conversation from is a hunter.
Yeah.
And you said you have a sales background. You can probably recognize it. I've been doing this for 20 some years as the finance person. I can also recognize, and my clients will say, what did you think of them? I said, no, they're not going to do it.
Right.
Well, why'd you say that? They're a hunter. They didn't give you any examples of how they went out and hunted. They just told you about how they took care of the existing customer base, or they grew from the existing customer base. I said, the conversation you want to have is, tell me how you grew business at your last customer, and shut up.
And they should know.
Talk. They should know. They should know in detail.
Yes.
They should be able to give you specific examples. And, how did you find them? Where did that lead come from? Did you generate your own leads? How did you generate them? These are, I want to say it's not rocket science, but it is almost an art to figuring that out. But if you blow that one, those are sometimes your most expensive. Salespeople are sometimes the most expensive, if not the most expensive resources in the company. And so you're gambling your hard-earned venture capital, or if you're a bootstrapper, we've been talking about VCs. There's an entire universe of bootstrappers out there. We have bootstrap clients as well. Okay. And they're the most parsimonious. The official word is cheap people I know, because they've had to get and scramble their way to that ARR without taking on any outside cash. And they are really good at finding salespeople.
Yep.
And the reason is they know that if they hire the wrong one, they're going to be in trouble.
Right.
It's a little bit different when you're sitting on $5 million worth of somebody else's money, and you can take a gamble than when you're sitting on your own money, and your gamble. Okay?
Way different.
Way different. So were you a bootstrapper, or were you a VC back?
I've done both. Primarily bootstrapped, and that's built everything that way. Over the last couple. have been that way and do
Yeah.
that going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about the alignment of sales and particularly sales operations with financial strategies? And what can founders do to make sure that those are really aligned and moving in the same direction as the company grows?
So one of the things, it may sound silly and detail at this point, but when I think in terms of sales operations, I'm thinking in terms of once you've closed the deal, how quickly can we get cash in the door, right? That what I call time to cash. That at that point is a combination of finance and customer success. Finance, because we need to know who's supposed to get that invoice. Does it require a purchase order? Has that been taken care of? Have all the IT and security boxes been checked? In other words, when I send that invoice out, am I going to collect it? And at the same time, is customer success bringing them on as quickly as possible so that the customer can't come back and say, I'm not paying your bill because we're not live on your platform yet, right? I talked about you want to have that contract so that you start billing them from day one, but the golden rule of business is whoever has the gold makes the rules, okay? And at that point, the customer has the gold. So they're going to make some rules of their own. And their rule is, I'm not paying you for something that doesn't work. Of course, right? So you want, from the time that contract is closed, finance needs to look at that and say, have you checked all of these boxes? Do we have, the bill to address correctly? Do we have this, if it's software you need for sales tax, you need to know where that software is being used primarily. You need to know that AP is getting it. If they're using Transcepta or some other, Coupa or some kind of payment processor, that it's getting there.
Yep.
The thing is, when I work with my clients, I said, the most important document that you have is actually the sales order, because on the sales order, I want you to ask the following questions: bill to address, primary use address, AP contact, name and phone number and email, whether a purchase order is required, payment terms, so that there's no argument over that.
Yeah.
And make sure that you have that right up front in front of the client, because when you hand that over to accounting and finance, we now have everything we need to know. Or I'll say, hold on, this order says it requires a purchase order. Where's the PO?
Right.
Oh, we don't have that yet. Well, then you're not getting your commission.
Yep.
Right? Bluntly, this order is not complete. It requires a purchase order. You can't have your commission. I'm not going to give you any commission until you get me that purchase order, because then I can invoice it and put the PO number on it. And now I have an expectation, because if it's a large organization that has POs, they will honor it.
Right. Right.
So the sales ops function for me is really one that where it really starts for me as the finance guy is when you say you've closed a deal, have you really closed it from a documentation perspective? And more important, is the success team often running from that instant to get those people enabled as quickly as possible on the software? Or if it's a stand-up software, of all the permissions been granted. We call it assets and entitlements, right? The asset is the accounts receivable asset. The entitlement is they're entitled to use your software and they can get into it. As long as the assets and entitlements are done properly, then your sales ops function really becomes clerical at that point. And it's a matter of getting the invoice out and collecting it. Then on the backside is you better have somebody monitoring your aged accounts receivable. I'm assuming that you're invoicing customers and that you're not collecting a credit card up front. If you are, then this conversation is irrelevant. You're processing them through Stripe. They're paying you with a credit card. You're done.
Yep.
So if you don't have the model, typically if you're a B2B, you're sending an invoice to somebody. And that means that somebody is responsible for paying it is the person who's supposed to be paying it, not Jill Jill is our project champion. She's over in the research area. Okay, so who's AP?
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So one of the things we do with our clients is make sure that the collections process, it's not a sales ops thing, it's a finance thing, that the collections process is really solid. And the collections process is a lot easier if you have all that documentation done right up front.
Makes sense. So how do you see AI changing the finance function over the next few years?
So I think what the first impact we're going to see is at the transactional level. AI is going to be able to funnel transactions into your accounting system a lot faster than a human being is. We're already seeing some of this. We've had this, with integrated bank feeds and credit card feeds for a long time, but usually it takes a human being, even with QuickBooks rules or zero rules, it still takes a human being to sit there and say, this really goes in this, this really goes in this really goes to this account. So it's going to come in at the transactional level first. That's what we're seeing. The second thing is it's going to be AI is going to transform the financial reporting function, because then it's going to be able to take the collected data that's been classified correctly and produce financial reports and do a lot of the closing of the books. So I anticipate that what's going to happen is AI is really going to start taking over accounting functions first before it heads into the finance side of things. Mostly because accounting is easier to AI, in my opinion, than finance is, because it follows fairly set rules.
Sure.
Accounting is very rules based. Okay, it's we all have heard. If you've not heard the term GAAP, you should know what that means. Generally accepted accounting principles, and GAAP has a certain set of rules, and it's everybody's agreed that this is how we do accounting. So it'll be easier. AI is really easy at taking over things that are repetitive and rote and follow rules. So that's number one. Then it's kind of like, how does it work with accounting and finance now? After the accounting is done, the next thing that steps in is what's called the FP&A function, the financial planning and analysis function. And that comes from analyzing financial statements. So I see the next stage will be the financial statement analysis software, the AI coming in and saying, okay, assuming that you've got your books correct, here's your budget, here's your actual, what went wrong. Right? That's the thing that we really need to make that'll happen. I think the next stage then after that is going to be in the projections and the forward-looking financials.
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, it'll happen. And if you are in accounting right now, you should probably be really nervous about your job security, because accounting is the one function. As a matter of fact, it's funny. I think it was Oxford University, the one in the UK. This was several years ago. Did a study where they said, taking a look at technology trends right now on automation, they predicted that 50% of U.S. jobs within the next 20 years would be, obsolete from automation. And guess what was in the top 10? Accounting.
Sure.
Not finance, accounting.
Yeah.
And if there's anybody out there who's confused, well, they're the same thing, aren't they? No, they're really not. Accounting is backwards looking. It's taking care of what is recording what has happened. And finance is forward looking. It's predicting and projecting what's going to happen. Right. And those are two very different views of the world. So when it comes to classifying what's already happened, that's why it's easy to AI that out. When it comes to prediction, that's the harder sauce, right? That's where all these trillions of brain cells come into play and all the experience comes into play. That's going to be a little bit harder for AI to replace.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts about the threat of fraud brought about by deep fakes and the potential impact on the finance function? That's been in the news here just recently.
I'm so glad you asked that question. It's scary. Okay, so back in February of this year, I was reading in, I think it was CNN, as a matter of fact, about a company in Hong Kong where the finance director was on a Zoom call, a video call or whatever, with his CFO boss, who was instructing him on how to do a wire, and wired millions and millions of dollars on fraud, because guess what? That CFO was a deep fake.
Yeah.
Now, I've shared that CNN link to every client. I said, what this is it shows you just first of all, the extent to which fraudsters are willing to go in order to get your money, but how it's become possible. I have control of clients' bank accounts. It's part of the function. Our company does, right? And my people know that if I call them, that it's me, right? But what happens if someday they get a phone call from my phone number and it sounds just like me?
Right.
And giving them an instruction. That I don't have a clear answer to that. I think what's going to happen is that we're going to be driven back to a day where there's going to be some sort of physical confirmation that you are who you say you are. There has to be. It's almost like in the old days, it was like your fingerprint or whatever it happened to be. But the ability for deep fakes now to basically create videos that are so realistic and lifelike that they could impersonate me, or a client CEO could be impersonated to me
Right.
and said, "Hey, Anthony, we decided to do this and this and this." I don't have a clean answer, but it's something that does play at the back of my mind. I've not had that happen to us yet. Okay, none of in any of the years that we've been working, we've never lost any client money through being phished, and I'm proud of that record because one of the clients I used to work with, back in the day when I actually was a salary employee, was a cybersecurity company. So they beat the living daylights out of us on fraud and phishing and other things like that. So I suspect every email, right? It's
Yeah.
like, you can't be paranoid enough, right?
Yeah, I do as well.
Right. So, and it's to the point where, I will reach out and call somebody on my cell phone if I feel like, hey, something doesn't smell right here.
Yeah.
Um, just, and you get a sense, but yeah, I'd say that is a real, and it's not just in business, it's personal finance as well.
Absolutely.
It's, your wife calls you up on the phone, says, "Hey, honey, I need, some money really quick," or whatever. I don't know how they would do it. But the ability of AI is, if you're not nervous about it, you should be. I don't think you need to be paranoid and lose sleep over it yet. But if you're in finance and you have the control of somebody's bank account, then you should be very nervous.
Yes.
And you should be really extra cautious about anything. You trust your gut. Okay. If anything is sending a signal off and you say, this does not sound right or doesn't feel right, or I've never had my boss ask me that before, then you should listen to that, because that's probably your last defense against doing something that's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah. We've had the same scam run multiple times. A lot of times it happens to new employees as they get the text message from, me saying, "Hey, go buy me some gift cards." And it happens, I don't know, probably once a quarter to somebody. And so now it's become a joke in the organization, but it's something we're always communicating about this. If anything seems off, ask somebody. Don't just take orders. Don't just say yes. Don't just, don't think you're going to get in trouble. Question it. If anything is weird, ask the person. If you get an email, if you get a video, I mean, just doing the podcast, whether, video, audio, that stuff is out there now. And so it makes it much more easy to do those kinds of things and try and run those kind of phishing scams. So I think just that being aware.
Go back to the basics. In the old days, it was called segregation of duties.
Right.
Okay. Right. And,
it takes more than
you
one
should
person.
it always takes more than one person to transact in cash.
Yes.
Okay. Above a certain dollar amount. I mean, a few dollars here and there I don't care about. But you should always have that somehow figure out, how do I set it up so it's not just me authorizing this? When my clients say, okay, we want you to handle the accounts payable, that's fine. But I'm going to make sure that there's an approval process ahead of time, to make sure that only the right bills are coming in for me to pay. And oh, by the way, I'm going to call you ahead of time and say, here are the bills I'm going to pay. Is that all right? And here's who it's, and it sounds like, it really slows things down. It doesn't really, if you set it up right. So that's pretty efficient. And there have been a couple of instances where, a bill even went through approval. And I said, I just don't recognize this vendor. I said, are you sure? Yeah, I approved it. But, now that you mention it, I'm not sure what that's for.
Right.
And suddenly the two wetware, I love wetware. It's a great term. Thank you, Gibson.
Yeah.
The two wetwares are comparing notes at this point, and we're saying, hey, there's something wrong here. And it turns out that invoice was not valid, that was a spoof. I had one land in my inbox this morning. Looks really legitimate. It's like we use Bill.com on a lot of our clients. Came into the Bill.com inbox, and I'm looking at it and saying, wow, this looks great. Wow, that's a lot of money. That's not in the budget. Right? There's another control. If you have budgets, this is plug another thing. That forward-looking financial forecast, that is a fraud prevention tool.
Right.
And it's a fraud prevention tool because if I see an invoice for a big spend on engineering cost or something like that, and I don't see that in my forecast, immediately I'm going to ask my CEO, did you authorize this?
Right. Where
No,
did
I
that
don't
come
recognize. Where'd that come from? What is that?
from?
Oh, I don't know what that is. That's not real. Boom, done. Right?
Yeah.
Stopped at that point. So that forward-looking forecast isn't just useful for projecting your cash, it's also useful for protecting your cash, because if something comes in that's not in the budget, you should be asking yourselves all sorts of questions like, how did this happen? Where
Right.
did this come from? Is this legitimate? Now, it could be it is legitimate and somebody went out there and authorized a contract that they shouldn't have. Now you've got a control issue that you need to address, right? But it allows you at least that point to say, hey, this doesn't fit the budget.
Makes a lot of
Is
sense.
it real?
Yeah. Well, where can people learn more about you online?
You can find me in the dojo just about 4 or 5 days. No, I'm sorry. I do judo. He said, where can people find you? In the dojo, flipping bodies around. The best place to find me is saasgurus.io. SAASGURUS, saasgurus.io. All of our resource information is there. We got a lot of podcasts like this that we put on there. We've got a lot of materials there. There's an easy to contact us page. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have one of the rarest last names on the planet, Nitsos, Nitsos. If you Google it, you'll find there are very few people with that last name. You will find me. So Google of Anthony Nitsos also turns me up. I'm on LinkedIn and my website. I purposely do not do other social media because I don't want to give the AI opportunities to figure out how to spoof me.
Smart. We'll make sure to link all of those in the show notes for sure.
I grew up on science fiction, baby. I know what wacko computer systems are capable of. So I was paranoid from day one. It's like, you know what? I don't like Facebook. They don't need to know anything more about me. I don't Twitter. I don't, Tinder or whatever the hell, name your social media. So website, saasgurus.io, my LinkedIn, Anthony Nitsos, rare last name, easy to find.
Outstanding. Well, and like I said, we'll make sure and link those in the show notes. Anthony, great conversation. Thanks for being on SaaS Fuel.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks again, Anthony, for coming on the show and sharing your insights and resources. You can learn more about Anthony at saasgurus.io. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And be sure to check us out on YouTube as well at Champion Leadership. Full episodes, video shorts, training, outtakes, cameras falling over, me getting rained on, all sorts of funny stuff on there. Hey, if you're a thought leader, share this episode with another founder. They will appreciate it and it'll bump up your status in their eyes. One, because you thought of them, and that's always a good thing. And two, because you knew of something cool that maybe they didn't. Everyone who shares this week gets a mystery meeting mover. It teleports your next meeting to a random exotic location, maybe a beach, maybe the moon, but spice up those Zoom meetings by making every meeting a surprise getaway. Join us next Tuesday where our founder is Renan Devellier, a visionary entrepreneur who sold his first startup to Google and now leads OSS Ventures. OSS Ventures is transforming manufacturing through technology while passionately tackling the challenges of climate change and corporate strategy for a better future. And next week on our SaaS Fuel Expert Series, we have Jacco van der Kooi, founder of Winning by Design and thought leader on revenue growth and strategy. He's the author of Revenue Architecture, Blueprints for a SaaS Sales Organization, and 7 other best-selling books on driving growth for SaaS companies. It's going to be an incredible episode. Can't wait for that one. I will see you next time, and as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.